This channel is part of the History Hit network.
A mountain shaped like a crown. Jiaoling rises majestically 1,200 meters above the Lurs Plateau in northern China. But Jiaoling isn't just a natural monument. Deep inside is a long-forgotten secret. Jiaoling is said to hold the tomb of an emperor who died in 649 AD. His name was Taizong. Fact or fiction? Researchers have only recently begun to find out. Professor Zhang Jianlin is an archaeologist. He specializes in the Tang dynasty, which ruled China from 600 to 900 AD. He has examined dozens of graves, but so far he has never realized his great dream: to find the tomb of Emperor Taizong in the heart of Jiaoling Mountain. Professor Zhang realizes he's setting his sights very high, for Taizong's final resting place is one of the largest burial complexes in the world. Yet, looking down from the summit, there's not a sign of it. Historical sources say that 1,400 years ago, vast palaces stood at the foot of the mountain. The mausoleum, if it existed, must also have been immense. But will it ever be found?
昭陵的修建，应该说至少是经历了13年的时间，也就是说从贞观10年到贞观23年。那么太宗葬了以后，可能还有一些补充的建筑。当时修建这个昭陵的时候，委派了一个非常重要的大臣来负责这个陵墓的修建。中央专门有一个机构呢，叫贞观署，他来承担这个陵修建的这个整个工程。那么还有一个非常重要的是，这个昭陵到现在为止，我们还不太清楚这个它的墓道口到底在什么地方。
2 kilometers from the summit, there's a satellite tomb. Colleagues of Professor Zhang excavated it some years ago. Now he himself is journeying back in time to discover more about Taizong and his era. Step by step, he's going 1,400 years into the past. Murals testify to the spectacular blossoming of art and culture under Taizong. Niches in the wall house stone figures, guards keeping watch at the gates of eternity. Then, the entrance to the burial chamber. And inside is a mighty sarcophagus. Professor Zhang thinks it was probably for a favorite concubine of Taizong's. What must the treasures have been like that were buried with her? The concubine's tomb is empty. Like so many others, it has been looted over the centuries. Time and again, Professor Zhang finds that grave robbers have beaten him to it. But just occasionally, luck is on his side. Like the time he found a gold headpiece decked with jewels. A Tang princess was wearing it when she was laid to rest. It's now being restored by German scientists working at the Xi'an Archaeological Institute. These belt links of pure gold were found in another Tang tomb. They show fantastic creatures in finest filigree. Monkeys and exotic beasts of prey with human heads. Among the most beautiful examples of ancient Chinese goldwork, these treasures give some idea of what might be found in tombs yet to be opened. Clay figures, brightly painted. A layer of lacquer has preserved their bright colors through the ages. They portray high-ranking officials. The quality of the work underlines the importance of such officials under the Tang dynasty. In China, the Tang era is remembered as a golden age, when the ruling dynasty encouraged the flowering of art and culture. The grace and beauty of Tang's statues, paintings and music were unmatched for centuries. This famous jade drinking vessel testifies to a civilization that reached its zenith 1400 years ago. Who was the emperor under whom these unique masterpieces were created? He is depicted on just one stone tablet. Yet Emperor Taizong is still known throughout China for his wisdom and justice. His maxim was, "When a ruler tyrannizes his subjects, it's as if he's tearing out his own flesh to fill his stomach." Taizong ruled his empire from this spot. Only the foundations of the great palace remain. Professor Zhang and his colleagues have reconstructed the palace as a 3D model. This is what the palace looked like 1400 years ago. It stood on the outskirts of the imperial capital, Chang'an. Like the palace, the whole city was designed from the ground up by Taizong's master builders. Its strict grid pattern became the model for many Chinese cities. The capital stood at what was then the center of the empire, not far from the modern-day city of Xi'an. 3 dynasties used this city in the Wei Valley as a power base. 3 dynasties, from 500 to 1000 AD, buried their rulers here. It's a Chinese version of the Valley of the Kings, with hundreds of hidden tombs. But Taizong was the first emperor to have a whole mountain as his mausoleum. Professor Zhang's search for the entrance to Taizong's burial chamber gets off to a promising start. On the northern side of Jiaoling, he finds some ancient foundations. The site appears to be the size of several football fields. Is this the ceremonial area mentioned by ancient sources? A local saying goes, "If you lift a stone from the ground, you've made an archaeological discovery." Everything argues against this being just a coincidence. Professor Zhang is sure that this was the site of a temple where the emperor's descendants honored him after his death. Even the ruins of the processional avenue remain. What did the site look like in Taizong's time? To build up a picture of the ceremonial area, Professor Zhang enlists help from Germany. Over 7,000 kilometers away, scientists and students at the University of Darmstadt are working on a unique project. They are creating a 3D model of the Jiaoling site. The Darmstadt team are experienced in virtually reconstructing old buildings. They have already recreated Inca temples, the original St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, and the Kremlin. To reconstruct the Jiaoling site, however, the scientists need some important data. What was the architectural style during the Tang era? What purpose did the buildings serve? Looking for answers, Professor Zhang makes a puzzling discovery. The characters on these pedestals mention countries outside China. They include Korea, India, and Arab kingdoms. Is there some connection between these and the stelae on which Emperor Taizong immortalized his favorite horses? These reliefs are replicas of originals that were unearthed in the 20th century. They commemorate the war horses that carried Taizong's army to victory. But they shed no light on the mysterious characters on the pedestals. The storerooms of the Xi'an Archaeological Institute house the finds from China's Valley of the Kings. Works of art thousands of years old are stored on these shelves. Any one of them would be a major drawcard for an exhibition. Here there are dozens of them, lined up like merchandise in a souvenir shop. Storeroom 5 houses the remains of 3 stone figures that Professor Zhang found near the pedestals on Jiaoling. At first, these statues also puzzled him. Many emperors decorated their mausoleums with life-sized figures. They represented imperial dignitaries who were to stand guard at their ruler's side after his death. But why did Taizong pick statues of foreigners?
现在从这些它的这个服饰、法饰，还有一些装饰品来看，都不是中原的，都应该是当时唐朝，对唐朝来说是外国的这些人物形象。那么为什么有这些外国人的形象呢？当然它有2个意义，一个是这个纪念唐太宗征讨四方的这种功绩。 还有一个呢，就是把这个太宗的这种功绩呢，向周边的少数民族宣布，它有宣威的作用。一个是祭功，一个是宣威。
Taizong's victories over his enemies in the West extended China's sphere of influence as far as the Arab world. Soon, however, he abandoned the role of victorious warlord. Instead, under his rule, China opened up to the rest of the world for the first time in her history. It was an achievement unmatched by any other Chinese leader until modern times. Taizong's capital, Chang'an, was the starting point of the legendary Silk Road. Ever since pre-Christian times, this east-west trade route had been a place of exchange for goods and ideas. But under Taizong, the Silk Road boomed as never before. Centuries before Marco Polo journeyed to the Orient, caravans travelled across Asia to the heart of China. What the traders brought back was new to Europe. They brought paper, fine china, and silk. Since 3000 BC, the Chinese had bred silkworms on mulberry leaves and spun their cocoons into a gossamer thread. The technique was guarded like a state secret. In Europe, where silk was a prized luxury item, countless myths circulated about its origins. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder claimed in the 1st century, "The Chinese are famous for a woolen material which they obtain from their woods. After they have softened the leaves of certain trees in water, they comb the white thread from the surface." The Farman Temple near Xi'an. In 1985, a Tang-era treasure was discovered here, quite by chance. It attracted worldwide interest. In an underground cavern, ritual vessels of gold and silver were found. Beside them were 80 bales of the finest silk. The discovery showed just how highly developed the technique of silk making had become over 1,000 years ago. Specialists from the Roman Germanic Central Museum in Mainz went to Xi'an to restore the priceless material. Just dealing with the fragments was a huge challenge. Conserving the bales was like a labour of Sisyphus. Layer by layer, the specialists separated the finely woven lengths of fabric. After conserving the colours and form, they pieced them back together. They were unable to save everything. A few pieces were beyond repair. But others now shimmer in their original glory. Like these trousers, once part of a precious silk ensemble. Threads of pure gold are woven into the delicate fabric. The trousers weigh a mere 150 grams. The luxury imports from the East didn't come cheap in Europe or in Arabia. This Arabian drinking vessel of pure gold was found on a dig near Xi'an. It was probably part of an expensive barter deal. But the merchants also paid cash. Arabian coins found in Xi'an are proof of Arab trade with China in the early Middle Ages. An Eastern Roman coin even points to contact between China and Europe. Not only did the Silk Road strengthen East-West trade, but art and culture also profited from the open borders. This Tang-era mural shows a sport that was entirely unknown to the Chinese prior to Emperor Taizong. Polo, a game imported from the Middle East, became increasingly popular at the imperial court. Professor Zhang is now convinced that many foreigners travelled as far as Chang'an and stayed there. For the stone figures found on Jiaoling are not the only images of barbarians created by Chinese artists. The foreigners' beards clearly made a lasting impression. Travellers, traders and missionaries from a range of countries all vied to describe the wealth of China. Xi'an's massive walls are a reminder that this was once the imperial capital. Built in the 16th century on the foundations of the old wall, they stretch for 12 kilometers around the city center. While the mighty walls and gates look intimidating, 1,400 years ago, the old imperial capital was a thriving multicultural city. It was also the largest city in the world, with a population of 2 million Chinese, Arabs, and Europeans. A unique epoch in China's history. Under Emperor Taizong and his successors, Buddhism spread throughout the empire and became the national religion. Yet there was still religious freedom in Taizong's empire. In Xi'an's Forest of Stone Museum, a kind of library of inscribed stelae, there's a tablet from the 7th century. It shows that there was even a Christian community in Chang'an. Most of the stele is inscribed in Chinese, but below it is another script, a confession of faith by the ancient Nestorian sect. The Pope had declared them heretical, but in China they were tolerated. Their monks were even allowed to evangelize. Engravings of Nestorian monks are at the base of the stele. Professor Zhang wants to know more about the city of Chang'an. What were its various quarters like? What about its buildings? Perhaps these ancient tablets can answer those questions. And indeed, on one stele he finds a picture of Taizong's residence, the imperial palace. The walls, gates and buildings are all shown in detail. He transfers the relief onto rice paper by ink rubbing, an ancient Chinese method of copying. This is how, for centuries, artists and scholars passed on their knowledge of Chinese civilization. Professor Zhang has a hunch that the palace plan will help him work out the layout of the ceremonial site on Zhaoling. Back in his office, he compares his copy of the plan with the outline of the site on the northern side of the mountain. His hunch pays off. In fact, the match between the plans is even better than he expected. Now he has all the data he needs to reconstruct the northern side of Zhaoling.
唐昭陵这个遗址，它总体的布局，我们和这个唐长安城的工程进行了比较。进行了比较以后呢，我发现有一个非常有趣的现象，就是它在这个工程的这个总体的布局和结构上，和昭陵的寝宫遗址的这个布局是完全一样的。那么它在这个北边呢，同样设了2道墙，这一个门，这一个门。那么就和这个唐大明宫的这个工程的这个总体布局是完全一样的。这说明一个问题，就是在唐代帝王陵园的这个布局的设计上，完全仿照了唐长安城工程的这么一个结构，也就是说，这个和中国传统的视死如生这么一种观念是完全一致的，就模仿地上生前所享用的这个工程的结构，然后呢，在陵园建造这么一个建筑。
Professor Zhang passes on his results to the researchers in Darmstadt. They enter all the details to create a three-dimensional picture. The construction method, the type of materials, the structure of the surfaces, it's like a giant jigsaw puzzle. Slowly, using even the smallest scraps of information that Professor Zhang can give them about the tomb and the Tang era, a 3D picture of the ceremonial site takes shape.
Das Glück ist, dass der ausgrabende Archäologe, Herr Zhang, ein sehr guter zeichnerischer Vermittler war, der sofort hochtransformieren konnte aufgrund von Vergleichsbauten oder Befunden aus der tangzeitlichen Zeit uns Hinweise geben konnte auf die Erscheinungsgestalt der Gebäude. Also es sind kleinste Spuren, die fast wie eine Indizienkette zur Formfindung und zur Bestimmung des Gebäudes führen.
Professor Zhang's research becomes virtual reality. A journey 1400 years back in time to the gates of the ceremonial area. On each side of the entrance is a mighty watchtower. In front of each tower is a symbolically equipped armory. Beyond the gate is an enclosed courtyard. It's lined by stelae on which Taizong immortalized his favorite horses. And finally, there are the statues of the barbarians. It all points to the fact that the site was conceived as a gesture of peace towards foreign peoples. But the reconstruction also shows that the entrance to the burial chamber cannot possibly have been in this enclosed area. Professor Zhang's quest is not over yet. He shifts his focus to the south side of Jiaoling. But over the centuries, local peasants have cultivated more and more land on the south side. Their fields now extend to the very edge of the mountain. Corn is the main crop cultivated on this fertile plain. It's the staple diet of the rural population of North China. All traces of the palace site, which historical sources place here, have long since disappeared beneath the peasants' fields and houses. While Professor Zhang's spot tests brought a quick breakthrough in the open terrain of the north side, here they would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Traces of the remote past are rarely so obvious as they are here. Farmers still draw water from this well. It was sunk at the foot of Jiaoling 1400 years ago. Professor Zhang believes that this same well was used by the workers who built the emperor's tomb. On the settled south side, archaeologists face an impossible task. The area is too wide. Any search for the tomb entrance would take years. But Professor Zhang can call on backup from the latest technology. These men are experts from the University of Vienna. Their equipment is for geomagnetic prospecting. 4 sensors test the strength of the magnetic field beneath the surface and register any irregularities. The machine reads the ground to a depth of 1 meter, and meter by meter, it builds up a picture of what lies beneath the surface. Together with readings from a radar imaging machine, this geomagnetic data creates a 3-dimensional picture of the ground structure. The experts can interpret the printout just as a surgeon reads an X-ray. They are able to give Professor Zhang suggestions about the most likely places to start digging. Sure enough, Professor Zhang does find something at one of the places they identified. Half a metre below the surface are the remains of walls. After the site has been surveyed, Professor Zhang compares the data with measurements cited in historical reports. There can only be one conclusion. He has found the foundations of the wall around the palace gardens. The site turns out to be a real treasure trove. Ornamental roof tiles have survived intact. Bricks still bear the names of the workers who made them 1,400 years ago. For the archaeologists, it's an El Dorado. It provides details that help the scientists in Darmstadt to build up a picture of the whole site. This is what the palace on the south side of Jiaoling probably looked like. The imperial residence was surrounded by buildings that housed the priests and hundreds of servants. A bizarre ritual was carried on in this kingdom of the dead. Every day, the imperial robe was laid out for the late emperor as if he were still alive, and eunuchs served him a princely meal, for according to the doctrines of ancestor worship, the emperor lived on in the hereafter. The palace was a halfway house on the journey from this world to the next. This is why Professor Zhang is convinced that the entrance to the tomb is somewhere on the south side. Jiaoling still guards its greatest secret, but step by step, Professor Zhang is closing in on it. As their base, he and his colleagues are using a cave house on the south side. He has come across an old document that could be the key to locating the tomb. According to this document, a warlord entered the mountain tomb in the year 940. He recorded what he found. In the middle of the mountain, we found a palace that was no less magnificent than any in the outside world. The coffins stood in a great chamber. The side rooms housed chests on stone platforms in which we found the treasures of past dynasties.
根据唐会耀和五代史的记载，当时有一个军阀叫温韬，他曾经到过这个昭陵的石室。那么通过他对昭陵石室的描述，我们知道昭陵石室它有个非常长的隧道，当时记载的是75丈，和现在的尺寸应该是225米左右。那么这个我们在山上呢确实发现了一些石室和这个石券的窑洞。这个石券的窑洞呢，很可能它是放置这个随葬品的，就是唐太宗昭陵的随葬品。
Not 100 meters below the summit, Professor Zhang and his colleagues find caves. The walls are lined with hewn stone. They also discover dozens of small items, stone figures and bronze jewellery. Professor Zhang suspects that this is all that the looters left behind. But there's one precious item that the grave robbers overlooked. In a recess, Professor Zhang finds a broken clay sculpture of a soldier on horseback. Despite the discovery, Professor Zhang isn't entirely satisfied, for the caves did not lead to the tunnel into the tomb, as he had hoped. Purely by chance, on the way back to base, he comes across another cave. This one is 70 meters below the summit. Is it the entrance referred to in General Wen Tao's record? Does the tunnel to the tomb lie somewhere behind this stone wall? In the dim torchlight, there's no sign of any hidden entrance. Instead, Professor Zhang finds the remnants of some stone foundations. And he finds a mechanism for closing the cave entrance. Zhang is convinced. All the signs point to this being a looted satellite tomb, rather than the entrance to the tunnel.
这个石室呢，实际上我们从它的结构上来看，它应该是一个陪葬墓，因为它具备了一个墓葬所具有的几个要素，一个是它拥有这个墓道、甬道、墓室、棺床，还有壁画。那么像这样一个墓，选择这样一个位置，它很可能是和太宗关系特别密切的一个人物的墓葬。那么我们推测很可能是像这个贵妃这样一些人物。那么根据史书的记载，像这个《唐辉耀》和《两唐书》的记载，山上当时修建了栈道，栈道是为了修建陵和埋葬太宗的时候所使用的。
The hunt for the tunnel entrance has reached a dead end. The experts in Darmstadt offer to help with a unique experiment. They will try to locate the entrance using a computer-generated 3D model. A quest in cyberspace. First, all the available data is entered. Professor Zhang's on-site observations are invaluable. They also use data from historical sources, and they draw on the history of Chinese architecture. Traditionally, Chinese buildings have a north-south orientation. So, in the model, a line is drawn from the northern site over the summit to the southern gate. Interestingly enough, this axis cuts right through the cave discovered by Professor Zhang. If the cave is a satellite tomb, it is reasonable to assume that the emperor must be buried somewhere above it. Accordingly, the emperor's final resting place must lie somewhere between the circular marker and the summit. But where exactly? Professor Korb's team evaluates the data one more time. And again, General Wen Tao's report proves helpful. According to Wen Tao, a suspension bridge led to the start of the tunnel. He even records how long it was. Exactly 338 meters. And there's another clue. Wen Tao's report also says that the bridge ran along the south side of the mountain at the steepest point.
Die steilste Stelle, die sich ergibt, ist tatsächlich im Süden an diesem kleinen Bergrücken vorbei zu dieser Stelle. Und jetzt trifft sich etwas, dass dieses Maß, wenn man es tatsächlich abwickelt an der Kante, diese beschriebenen 140 Fuß sind, die aus der Literatur kommen, was 338 Metern sind. Und dann erreicht man, wenn man die Neigung um 15 Grad dreht, also die Steigung, wie man noch gehen kann, Lasten transportieren kann, eine Stelle, die relativ eben ist, die wiederum zum südlichen Palast führt. Warum ist das jetzt so wichtig, der südliche Palast? Weil genau dort auch Funde vorhanden sind von Hütten, von Bauarbeitern, von denen, die die Zeremonialanlage erstellt haben, die Südanlage erstellt haben und das Grab erstellt wird.
All the data are entered. If the suspension bridge begins where the north-south axis meets the mountain and then skirts the steepest part of the slope, after 338 meters, it would come to flat terrain sloping down to the South Palace, just as Professor Zhang thought. That's the theory, at any rate. Now it's time to test it on site. Professor Zhang and his colleagues set out. Their goal is the spot where the computer located the suspension bridge. But what should they be looking for? They certainly don't expect to find the remains of a wooden bridge after 1400 years. After a strenuous climb of over 1,100 meters, the expedition eventually reaches the area identified by the computer model. And they make a sensational discovery. At the steepest point, they find circular holes in the ground. They are so regular that they can't be natural, but must have been hewn out of the rock. Professor Zhang is sure that the holes were for pillars from which the bridge was suspended. With mounting excitement, he seeks out the holes marking the position of the bridge. Where will the trail lead? Where will the holes end? After 50 meters, he can go no further. The mountain drops sharply away. Has Professor Zhang reached his goal? Is this the entrance to the burial chamber?
关于这个山上的栈道啊，达摩施达特大学的科普教授他们做过一种复原，但是那种复原呢，恐怕是有问题的，因为它是垂直的从山下通到山上的。实际上，它应该是按照这个山势的走向来走的，它不可能是一条直线，很可能它是一个弯曲的，贴着山崖的这个边儿啊，弯曲过来以后，然后到达这个玄宫的入口，这么一个位置。
The historical source provides the final clue. It tells us that the tunnel to the tomb was 225 meters long. If the tunnel started at the end of the suspension bridge, this must have been the course it took. If the tunnel were angled any differently, it would emerge from the mountain too soon, without reaching the required 225 meters. The virtual scenario pinpoints the position of the burial chamber. It's almost certainly here, directly beneath the summit of Jiaoling. Zhang Jianlin has almost realized his dream. He looks across at where the mountainside conceals the tunnel leading to the emperor's final resting place. Never was Emperor Taizong's tomb more within his reach than now. But something stops him from revealing Jiaoling's secret and opening the tomb.
通过最近几年我们对昭陵陵园遗址的调查，我们现在基本上推测它这个玄宫的入口很可能在这一片山崖上。尽管太宗说这个丧事呢要从简，但实际上我们现在从对这个昭陵陵园遗址调查情况来看，当时的工程是非常浩大的。那么在地宫里边这个埋藏的这随葬品呢，很可能有很多出人意料的发现。那么这个昭陵这个玄宫呢，根据我们现在的这个条件来讲，还不能够进行发掘，因为我们现在这个文物保护的技术啊，还没有达到能够对所有材质的文物进行比较好的保护的这么一个程度。
Professor Zhang knows what he's talking about. Only one imperial tomb has ever been opened. In 1958, party officials ordered the opening of the 400-year-old vault of a Ming Dynasty emperor. The underground palace had 5 interconnected chambers, covering more than 1,000 square meters. In the last chamber, they found 3 coffins. The sarcophagus of Emperor Shunzong was in the middle and was the best preserved. The other 2 coffins, with the remains of his wife and an imperial concubine, had disintegrated. They were surrounded by 26 chests full of gold, jade, porcelain, and precious jewelry. Treasures for their final journey. Along with the archaeologists, propaganda officials were also present during the salvaging of these unique treasures. The officials hoped that the splendor with which the emperors surrounded themselves, even in death, would be a lesson to the people on the evils of exploitation and tyranny. So the cameras were rolling to record the historic moment. Over 3,000 objects were removed from the burial chamber. The breathtakingly beautiful gold and porcelain items were able to be preserved. But not so the calligraphy and the priceless silks, which still shone in their original glory. They quickly disintegrated and were irretrievably lost. Zhang Jianlin doesn't want to risk that happening again. His dream has been realized. He has solved the mystery of Zhaolin. Emperor Taizong will be left to rest in peace. Not forever, but at least for the time being. Until that time comes, Professor Zhang can reflect on the principles of his ancestors. Taoism taught them the highest principle of all human behavior. It's called Wu Wei and means do nothing and thereby achieve everything.